Good evening and welcome to the Hibs Observer Monday briefing with myself, Liam Bryce, joined by Craig Nisbet to look back over Saturday's 3-0 win over Falkirk at Easter Road. Another 3 points on the board in the Scottish Premiership for David Gray's side, getting back on track after 2 consecutive losses. And all told, a pretty comfortable day at the office for Hibs. 2 goals from Kieran Bowie and a Martin Boyle penalty, sending them on their way. So we're going to dig in to all the key talking points from Saturday's game with obviously input, insight and analysis from Craig. So just before we get going, folks, as always, a wee word for our sponsor, the Hibs Observer. It's brought to you by S1 Jobs. If it's time to hand in your transfer request, then head over to s1jobs.com and upload your CV today. With thousands of jobs across Edinburgh and the surrounding area, you'll find the one at S1 Jobs. So start your search today. Craig, how's it going? How are you getting on?
Very good, mate. Very good. And a nice bounce back to winning ways at the weekend there. So I think a really important win, even though it was only, we were saying it was 2 back-to-back defeats for a very long time. But it seemed that there was a wee bit of pressure and a wee bit of discontent. So I think it was good to get a home game and a home win under our belt.
Yeah, I very much needed. Because I was saying we had Colin on last week, it felt as though Hibs were building a wee bit of momentum with those 4 wins out of 6, and then it's kind of what this league is like at times, to be honest. Those 2 defeats seemingly coming out of nowhere. Probably a better performance against Celtic. We'll not talk about the Motherwell one again. We'll just consign that to the dustbin of history, hopefully. But as you say, it was very much required Hibs to get themselves back on track. So what were your, before we dig into the finer details of it, what were your overall thoughts on the 90 minutes?
I thought first half we were really good. I think the tweaks and the changes that we made really worked for us, and we limited Falkirk, I'd say, to not very many chances in the first half, and I thought we were pretty dominant and really aggressive, and probably the Hibs that David Gray's described before, in terms of how he wants them to play, that looked the closest, what we've seen for a while. I would say, like, in the second half, I thought, especially up until we made the changes, I thought Falkirk got back into the game. I thought their changes made a real difference for them. Aguiman and Cartwright came in and just gave them a lift, a bit more pace in behind, and I kind of thought we dropped off and we looked really tired, I thought, at the game. We couldn't press as aggressively as we had done in the first half. But once we made the changes, we were able to exploit getting in behind Falkirk and getting that third crucial goal. I think it would have been a different if that offside, if they had just been on and it went to 2-1. I'm not sure how I would have felt, how that game would have panned out in the end. But, VAR, I suppose, did its job in our favour this time. But yeah, I think my overall very positive, some brilliant individual performances, some, big moments from Salinger, from Bowie, performances, Chaiwa, Mulligan, it looked great. I just think maybe the subs coming a bit quicker in the second half would be my only sort of negative.
Yeah, that has been a talking point at times. But we'll get to that as always. We'll start at the beginning, shall we? When the team sheet came out, there was a wee bit of debate, a wee bit of discussion around how exactly Hibs were going to line up. So obviously, we found out on Friday that Nicky Cadden wasn't going to play any part in the game, looking at 10 days to 2 weeks out, according to David Gray. And he also said on Friday that Jordan Abita was struggling a little, and lo and behold, neither of them made the squad. So I'm not even going to try and say that word. It dictated a couple of changes, or at least so we thought, and how Hibs were going to shape up. When I seen the team sheet, we had to take a wee bit of a punt when we put our team news graphic out on the Hibs Observer Twitter, thinking that it could have been a change to a back 4. There was talk potentially of a midfield diamond, but as it turned out, it wasn't too much. It was probably kind of David Gray. He's gone for the sort of path of probably minimal disruption to Hibs' usual setup, and it is very helpful when you do have a player like Jamie McGrath, who is and the phrase that David Gray always uses about him is like, sort of tactically intelligent. He always says that you only need to tell him something once and he understands it, he'll execute it, and he won't question it. So he was sort of moved out to, as you can see here on the passing network, how Hibs sort of linked up positions that players received the ball during the game on average. So, I mean, you're just kind of looking at this here, it almost looks like a wee bit like a 3-4-3, and that was probably influenced by how obviously the positions McGrath was taking up, and then in turn what the likes of Chaiwa were doing off the back of that, sometimes Martin Boyle as well. But we'll start with McGrath, moved out to that sort of left wing back role. And it worked, didn't it? It was, you kind of wondered how he was going to approach that. Obviously, he's not like for like whatsoever with Nicky Cadden, but he is, he's a clever player. We know when he's playing in his, his preferred more central role, he does pick up, really clever wee pockets of space. He always uses the ball well. So, I mean, I don't think it was any great surprise that he was able to adapt to that position. And I think what was kind of most interesting about it is he played it his own way. He wasn't, trying to play as an out-and-out wing-back or a winger. And it gave Falkirk something a wee bit different to think about. What was your, was that what you thought when the team sheet came out? And what did you think of McGrath in that role?
Yeah, there was a bit of that as soon as the team came out, I had a few messages going, what is it? Is it a 4-3-3, 4-2-3-1? Are we doing the same? And similar to you, I sort of thought about what Gray would do. Actually, I just can't see us really changing at the minute. I just, especially with that. And at various points in the game, which I can show you on the board in a wee minute, like it did maybe look at times that we were a bit like a diamond in the middle, just with how he covered when we were pressing. But it actually was quite shrewd from Gray, because bringing Barlasser back in and putting Chaiwa and Mulligan together meant that we could really press Falkirk aggressively, which I think you need to do against them. But it also meant that we had a couple of really willing runners in behind. With McGrath out on that left-hand side, there were spaces for Chaiwa to run on that side, for Boyle, for Bowie, for Mulligan on the other side as well. We've said on this podcast before about how you set up and you play a back three and you've got your wing backs, there needs to be runners off them, there needs to be runners in behind, or it can sometimes you can just go round in a U shape, just kind of like what Motherwell did against us, and you turn the ball over and you get attacked. So I think those McGrath come in playing in that role worked really, really well, and I think it was sort of balanced off by what Chaiwa was able to offer in the middle of the park, what Mulligan was able to do, and then I think it just had a better impact on two players in particular, which was Boyle and Bowie, because they started to get a bit of service, which quite often the service they do get is the ball being thumped to them miles away from the box. So they were able to actually get service in behind, which I think made a massive difference in the game.
Yeah, it all came together very, very nicely, to be honest. So what we'll do, we'll go on to, I know we'll usually look at the expected goals race chart at this point of the show, but what we'll do, since we've been talking about McGrath, we'll let Craig demonstrate just how that was, how that panned out in practice. So we're obviously talking a bit about it here and on paper, but let me just change our layout here. Here we go.
Yeah, so obviously, so this is McGrath out here on this side. And when we often play with Nicky Cadden, as we said the last few weeks, he tends to play really higher up the pitch, and we all tuck around to try and get him on the ball. But McGrath was able to kind of hold his position here, and he sort of just stayed quite disciplined and out there. What it meant, because Falkirk play a 4-3-3, you can see we're matched up in the middle of the pitch. Chaiwa and Mulligan picked up by there too, and Barlasser picked up as well. So you knew it was going to be difficult for Barlasser to get on the ball and play through. So it was really important to get McGrath on the ball. Now, I think Falkirk tried to take a leaf out of Motherwell's book, which was let's just sit off and leave, our central defender in the middle, which was Rocky, on the ball. But Iredale and O'Hora were still able to get in possession, and even when the ball went out to this area, they weren't really aggressively pressing. So it did leave us a wee outlet to go in behind. Now, where McGrath did really well was, if he stayed in this position here, the right back's never going to come that far up the pitch, because it leaves this space. So when he did do that, he would pick up the ball, and of course, then if the right back does come out to engage him, that space is in behind, and often Chaiwa would just spin and go into that area. A couple of times it was Boyle, a couple of times it was Bowie, but it just left us lots of good options down there and just meant we could stretch the game and get further up the pitch. If he sat off, or even when those runs were made, like if Chaiwa made that run and players followed, McGrath's good enough, and because he's quite comfortable, on his left and right, he would drift inside. And once he drifts inside to these areas, of course, it creates a little bit more chaos. We can switch the play. There's runners going in behind, or it commits an extra man, which means guys like Mulligan can get on the ball. So it actually worked really, really well. And I think, like you said at the top there, because he's so good tactically, he's just looking at what the opposition are doing and then making his movements off that. And I think I'm obviously on his side in the first half, and you could just see that I thought he had his timing down to an absolute T, the way he drifted in. Iredale even got forward a couple of times to kind of overlap and support. And I just think it's something that's been by pure chance he's ended up out in that position, with the 2 injuries, but it just shows that actually he's capable of going in and doing that. I did think he defensively struggled in that second half when Falkirk changed things around. You could see he was tired in a little bit in that area, so it's certainly not something I think you could rely on him for the whole game. But I think for an attacking point of view at home in games like that, where the opposition are going to come and maybe press you quite aggressively and things like that, what an option to have out there. And it's something I think you can maybe definitely see us using or utilising again in the future. Maybe a wee rotation where he comes out there and Nicky Cadden drops into midfield for a bit. I just think that we can be a bit more creative in there. So yeah, it was an experiment that worked really, really well.
Yeah, and I think you make a good point there, and it was the one I was going to come on to about the sort of viability of doing this in future. Like, obviously, if everybody's available, you're going to play your best players in their best positions, their strongest positions. But I mean, with Nicky Cadden picking up a muscle injury, there's been a sort of 2-week timeline put on that. But again, this isn't based on any knowledge, but sometimes these things can be a wee bit variable. You've got to be careful with those kind of injuries. Jordan Abita's going to AFCON, we expect. So it's, there is a fairly decent chance that we could see Hibs having to try and do this again. And I think it's where it is a positive is just showing a wee bit of, that there's flexibility when you've got intelligent players like McGrath. And it's something we've maybe discussed on here before, I think, particularly after the Motherwell game, about how I know I promised I wasn't going to talk about that game again, but it is kind of the point I want to make at the moment is we talked about how, stopping Balasser playing in that game essentially, really, really hamstrung Hibs, and it's, we talked about, I think, the sort of need to then find other solutions. And this certainly feels like one of them, because it's, as you've just demonstrated there, it creates problems for the opposition. And McGrath, I feel like even when he plays in the 10, sometimes he sort of gravitates towards the sort of inside left role anyway, in a similar way that we saw Junior Hoylett doing last season. So it's not something that's completely alien to him. But I think just as a broader point, it's good to see some sort of different variations tactically, different approaches of trying to break teams down, because I think we did maybe express a wee bit of concern that sometimes, that sometimes we felt opponents were maybe starting to think they've figured this Hibs team out. We know what they're going to try and do, and this is the way to try and stop it. But so this just introduces I think you saw it, that you used the word there, it introduces a wee bit of chaos in terms of you've got a player who wouldn't normally play in that position. He's playing it in a different way than you would expect, Cadden or Abita to do. So it was an interesting watch. I really thought, and certainly, as I said, but in a broader perspective, probably a really nice option to have discovered that you can utilise.
Yeah, no, totally. Because I think as well, if he's out and it worked well with Falkirk playing a back four. I think if he was up against another wing back for the game who could have maybe pinned him back a little bit more, I think it would have been more difficult. But certainly in a game, and we've talked about this, Gray and the coaching team becoming a bit more flexible, maybe not so much like with the shape, but at least the personnel in the shape. Because if you just change one player like we did there with McGrath, actually changes almost the way we play. So I think it's a really good option that we've stumbled upon. And like I say, potentially there is something there if he is back in that sort of left-sided role. Could he go out to the left? Nicky Cadden goes inside. Nicky Cadden can then make those runs in behind, where he gets a bit more space. He's further forward up the pitch. Like I think that could be an option. And just before I move the camera back, I thought it was worth, because it was times it did look like a bit of a diamond. Certainly out of possession. And I think part of that was because we had Chaiwa and Mulligan to press. Obviously Falkirk, like, they were quite clever. Their wide men sort of stayed in this position here, which sort of pulled McGrath and Chris Cadden back on that side. And then obviously across here, we were sort of matched up. And what they tried to do is they normally dropped sort of one player into this position, and then similar to what Motherwell did, they then pushed two up. But we were pretty brave, and Barlasser often got left with two. Chaiwa would come and press here, and if the ball went out on the left-hand side, you'd have Boyle pressing, and then that's where Mulligan could get across and engage in that position there. Where it looked like we played a diamond is that while that was going on, Barlasser obviously would come across and pick up this man on the ball side because it's the most danger. O'Hora would be here, Cadden would tuck back in, Rocky in, Iredale across, and then it would be McGrath coming into this position here, almost inside the pitch, to cover that extra midfield man. So at times they then started to look like a bit of a diamond out of possession, especially when it was going back. But again, you've got somebody tactically aware, and because he is a midfielder, it's natural for him to drift into those spaces and pick up men and pick up runners. So again, he just added that bit of experience in there as well, which I think made a massive difference, especially when we turned the ball over. He was then in a central position to drive forward and potentially be a bit more influential on that side.
Yeah, aye, absolutely. So let's take back to the stats bomb section of the show. Let me just get a layout, right, and we'll bring this back. Here we go. You'd think after all this time I'd be able to make these changes seamlessly, but it never quite works out that way. So I do appreciate everybody's patience with me. So let's talk about the goals. I mean, I did feel like it was a fairly uneventful first 20 or so minutes, although it did feel like Hibs were on top, controlling the game. But then you can kind of see a bit more activity after that. And then Martin Boyle was obviously the one to open the scoring, second week in a row, scoring from the penalty spot. But just let's kind of talk about the build up to it. So you can see it there around about the 35th minute. Obviously, folks, I'll explain it. If you've not joined us before and you're wondering, what am I looking at the moment? What are these lines on my screen? What is going on here? It's basically just charts the accumulation of each team's expected goals across the game. So it basically gives you an idea of the flow of the game in terms of chances created, which is what expected goals measures. So you can see here around about the 35th minute, Hibs going one up from the penalty spot, and that obviously gives a big spike in their expected goals. And you can see the second goal there, Kieran Bowie's much lower expected goals because that was a difficult chance to take. And then you can see the third one at the end there, up between the 80th and the 85th minute. So that's basically what you're looking at here. We'll take it back to the opening Hibs goal. I mean, it's kind of all about the pass from Josh Mulligan. I think he's actually the one that wins the ball back in the first instance. I'm not entirely sure about that, but I seem to remember that's what happened. But then the pass speaks for itself. It's a lovely ball through that kind of service you were talking about for Boyle, and then he's brought down for a spot kick, isn't he?
Yeah, I think I can't remember if it's Mulligan that wins it back, but it's a run from Chaiwa. There's a turnover anyway, and Chaiwa drives down the left-hand side, and then he cuts back in, finds Mulligan, and then it's a really brilliantly timed run for Boyle. Got to give him credit there, because I often criticise him for being caught offside a lot, but it was a really well timed run. Yeah, and I was just saying to you before we started recording, I caught Richard Foster saying he thought it was a a clear dive, and Boyle initiated the contact and all this kind of stuff. And I just can't wrap my head around that at all. I think the defender's far too close to him. It's it's just clumsy more than anything. He just Boyle gets across him, and if he does slow down or take the cut, it's whatever. But the defender's really close. I think Foster was just like trying to suggest that Boyle would have went down anyway without the defender being close to him. It was very bizarre, but I thought it was a penalty. And obviously he steps up and puts it away really well. And I think we really deserved the goal. I think I thought we were, the way we were playing at that point, we were certainly on the front foot, and you were a wee bit worried that we weren't going to get that opportunity. But it's a fantastic ball by Josh Mulligan, just so well weighted into that area that the defender, he gets too close, the keeper can't really come out, and Boyle's brought down and puts it away.
Yeah, it was an odd hill to die on for Richard Foster there, I thought. It was a strange one, because for me it's a clear penalty. And as you say, he's put it away well. It's a lovely pass from Josh Mulligan, who we'll talk about a wee bit later on. Second goal followed shortly after, and it was a nice wee cushion for Hibs to take into half-time, because Falkirk, I think even you were expecting some sort of reaction from them at the break, because Hibs were pretty dominant, controlling most of the territory, the possession, the chances. So to get that second goal just before the interval was probably one of the pivotal moments in the game, really.
Yeah, and I think this is definitely all sort of made by Josh Mulligan again. He's the one. Falkirk are actually on a pretty tasty looking counter attack, really, and he sort of wins the ball back, drives across.
I'm sorry, that was my bad. He wins the ball back for the second goal, wasn't the first goal. My
No, but I mean, to be fair, he was everywhere. He might have. To be fair, it's not. Yeah, and he drives. That's the thing. There's so much to talk about him, but it's just the way he drives with the ball. He's just ball carrying, and quite often you just don't see players that confidently do that. Certainly not always midfield players. They either want to run in behind without the ball, or they want the ball to feet to pass it off and move away. They don't want to sort of do it all, and he can. But just the way he carries the ball, like, there's nothing scarier than somebody running past you or running at you with the ball, is there? So he does really well, and I think we spoke before about him just having that final product, and he showed in those two occasions he does. But obviously, as he rolls the ball in the bowie, it's just a really sort of deft touch he takes. And again, I don't know how I'll credit Richard Foster, because he actually did give Bowie a lot of credit for this bit. So it wasn't all doom and gloom with his analysis, but how he managed to get the backlift on that, just to get from it, because he just barely takes a run up at it, and it's just an unbelievable finish. And just one that I'm just so delighted for him, because he wasn't playing particularly great, had a few sort of like things bounce off him and layoffs that he turned over at the opposition, and I was just delighted for him that he was able to score just such a good goal. And I know Graves probably more happy with the second goal he gets, but it was just nice to see him get that goal. Just done wonders for his confidence, and as you said, put us into a really good position going in at half time.
Yeah, he doesn't let his head go down, Bowie, does he? Even if it's not happening, he keeps at it, doesn't he?
He does, and actually it was funny just watching him, because a couple of times Chaiwa in the first half drove forward and probably should have squared it to him, and a few times Bowie absolutely lost the head at him for not getting the ball. And I think that's the beauty of him as a younger player and a striker, is that he just goes, he'll miss that, he'll be up again, he'll be ready to go again for the next one. And there was a bit of debate around me about him, people saying, oh, he's a young guy, and then somebody going, oh, he's played over X amount of games. But you've got to remember, they were a long time ago. I think he predominantly played. He sort of played, looks like as a wide player in a 4-3-3 or a 4-2-3-1. He's not really played as a central nine, and he's almost in a front two now, which is very different. I would imagine that would have been the same shape at Fulham, which is why he probably got loaned to Northampton, I would guess, is why they would do that. So in terms of, yes, he's not young, but and he is kind of inexperienced in that role. And also, it's very different playing for Northampton than coming up and playing in our league. It's especially this season where it's far more competitive. So I think fans, he can be frustrating, but I do think you can just see in those moments that he's got real quality, and it's just something that needs to continue to be nurtured and supported.
Aye, exactly. I think you've hit the nail on the head there. I think the point you make about him actually not having played that many games as an out-and-out number 9 is something that I think David Gray's been really keen to stress that point this season. he kind of tends to bring it up whenever he talks about Bowie as almost just to be like, look, he's still learning this position. You need to be patient with him. So as you say, but like to get that goal when he did, and then we'll talk about the second one in a moment. It was great for his confidence, great for his, I think, deserved just maybe for his level of persistence, if not maybe some of his general play in the first half. But as I said, he's a kind of seems to be the kind of character where he doesn't let things drag him down. He will keep making himself available. He will keep putting himself in positions, which I think you need to be able to do as a striker. Like, you need to have a short memory, really, don't you? Like, because I think if you get hung up on, certainly I think that was evident with the goal he scored, a few weeks ago when he'd missed that absolute sitter before it. But he seems to be able to just brush it off and be like, right, okay, well, where's the next one coming from? So really positive for him. And the third goal, in fact, actually, do you want to talk about how the game maybe changed a wee bit at half time before we get to the third goal? Because
I sort of touched on. I thought, I think Falkirk put Aguiman and Cartwright on, made a couple other changes, and I thought they did really well. I thought they started to look quite dangerous. Salinger made a big save. Maybe Nathan Ross, I think, maybe going through and curled it towards the top corner, and maybe a bit of a camera save from Salinger, but it was still a good save. They also had another ball in the box that I think bounced off Rocky. Salinger got down low for. So Falkirk were certainly pushing us, and I just think we dropped off, not in the players' mentality way, but is that thing of it's just something you can't press as aggressively as you would like all the way through the game, and plus you've got that 2-goal cushion. Maybe players are naturally starting to drop off, but you could see for some of them it looked like we needed to rotate things. Like Boyle looked quite knackered. I actually thought McGrath looked knackered. I'm surprised he actually managed to stay on, but Falkirk just managed to get back into the game, and I do think that the offside goal, I mean, McGrath actually gives it away on that side, and listen, it's a decent line from Hibs. We hold the line really well to catch him offside, but it was very, very tight, and I don't know if that goal would have went in, what it would have, like how the game would have changed. But I just felt that we needed to make the changes quicker. I know it was a wee bit tricky with all the injuries. It was a wee bit hard to kind of go, right, who do you put on and where? But for the third goal, obviously made the changes. Campbell comes on, Yuan comes on. We change into that sort of 4-2-3-1 shape. Newell obviously comes on as well. So we kind of have Newell and Mulligan as a deeper two. Iredale goes to left back. Chris Cadden goes to right back. Still got Rocky and O'Hora. Campbell plays as a 10, Yuan on the right, McGrath on the left, and Bowie through the middle. And you see straight away, O'Hora plays it out to Chris Cadden, who then, when he looks up, he's now got Ellie Yuan, but he's now got a Josh Campbell run going in behind, and it's a really good ball in behind. Brilliant run from Campbell. And then if you see Bowie, he just gets that. He gets the run on the defender, and then he just makes that little dart across him to get into the 6-yard box, and just a lovely little finish. And I know Gray spoke a lot about that, the kind of that Dwight Gale style goal, getting in between the posts. So it was really good to see him sort of across his 2 goals, scoring one of the more speculative efforts that I'm sure he enjoyed, but also getting that poacher's goal that he obviously is looking to add to his game. So a really good way to end the game. And I suppose just tactically, it's like a nice thing to see that we can tweak the shape if players are tiring, get guys on, get more runners in behind. It wasn't really a defensive change from Gray. It was actually fairly attacking to go, I'll get some extra bodies and go in behind. So I felt like that was something worth commenting on, because we've often questioned, I mean, he loves a triple sub. I think he seems to keep going back to that. But this one worked really, really well and got us a goal again at quite a crucial time, and then just kind of sunk the game for Falkirk, I think.
Yeah, just going back to Bowie's goal, it's one of those that will be especially satisfying for the coaching staff, I think, because, as you've touched on there, Gray spoke quite a lot after the game about the work that they've been doing with him to try and get him in those positions, because strikers can get so many goals just by being between the width of the post, and he's almost like he's made a habit at times, Bowie, of scoring the harder ones. Again, back to that, the chance again a couple of weeks ago where he headed over from close range, and then the one he scores it was against Dundee. It was in the box, but it was it wasn't an easy chance, and then the one he takes in the first half is such a difficult finish. So I mean, we all know that he's got those in his locker. It's just whether he can add that sort of poacher's instinct to it as well. And that was kind of good evidence that he's improving on that front with that third goal for Hibs on Saturday. So I mean, all round a positive day for him and a positive day for David Gray. The team getting back on track. So I don't think we can end this show today without talking more in depth about Josh Mulligan, because he was outstanding. And I think especially in the first half, Falkirk really just they didn't really have an answer to what he was. Well, I mean, they did have an answer, but it was to get 3 players booked, all for fouls on Mulligan, it was such a just such a blunt demonstration of just how influential and how badly they were struggling with him. And he's one of those guys where he just, as you said, he carries the ball so well, and he makes it look pretty easy, doesn't he? Like, he makes it look like anybody could do that. But as you've said, that's probably the beauty of it in a way, because it is such a difficult thing to do. As you kind of rightly said earlier on, there's nothing scarier for opposition players, for defenders, than somebody who's got the head down and is running at them. And it's almost a bit of a cheat code in a way, because coaches will spend an awful long time working out patterns of play, ways to shift the opposition defence around. But if you've got a guy that can just run past 3 or 4 people at a time, it makes that process a wee bit easier, doesn't it?
No, it definitely does. I think especially in the the middle of the park, and he's obviously spent a wee bit. He started off in the centre of the park, and then he was out right wing back for a while. He's now back in the middle, and we've often debated. I think everybody knows his best positions in the middle of the park, but we wondered if we would have to play him out there. But I think you could definitely see the consistency he's getting while he's playing in that central position. And he's had some really big performances now, really, really big influential performances in games. And yeah, I think that certainly that first half against Falkirk, and then probably towards the end of the second half, he sort of tailed off a wee bit like everybody else in that opening part of the second. But yeah, I think even just the way he was taking the ball, he was happy to get it. He was showing a bit of the John McGinn arse and rolling players and driving forward. And he was just, he just looked fearless. He just looked absolutely fearless. And as I said, adding, having an end product at the end of it as well, with, creating the penalty for the first goal and then getting an assist for the second. He nearly had a goal himself where he drove through and had a shot that just kind of went over the bar. It was excellent. And, I think we've definitely got a real talent on our hands. And you just hope that with more game time and more experience, he'll start putting these performances together a bit more consistently. But very, very exciting. They must have seen the draw Friday night and thought, right, now it feels real for the Scotland team, and let's just start turning on him and Bowie just turning on the performances.
Making themselves difficult to ignore, which is what you've got to do. And I think it was such a promising display from Mulligan in terms of how, it's almost as if he decided in that first half, I'm going to be the guy to make things happen. He's taking on responsibility. He's only just turned 23, so like Bowie, still a young lad, but there were so many promising signs. Like, we've spoken before about, how good he is about carrying the ball, but to then bring that end product so much to the fore at the weekend there is especially promising. The ball through for Boyle is fantastic. The second one, I think, for Bowie, he's got options in that situation, and it's, I think sometimes when that can, if you're, you get into that area and you've got so many options, you could have went left to Boyle, I think he could have went out wide, but he showed a lot of composure, I think, just to sort of take his time, assess, and then he picked out the right pass to Bowie in the end. So, I mean, I think you're kind of hoping that he's going to really, pull it all together consistently, and maybe start producing those kind of performances in some of the, the really biggest games as well. Your eyes are sort of drifting down the calendar to that Edinburgh derby coming up towards the end of the month. It feels kind of, if he's going to put himself him and Bowie as well, putting themselves in that, you know, that Scotland frame. I think these are the games that they're going to have to do it in. So we'll keep an eye on that. I don't want to get too ahead of ourselves with a few games to go, because it's Rangers up next in the league. So that game's been moved to a Monday night because it was, you know, didn't want there to be a clash with the Premier Sports Cup final, which is coming up at the weekend. I just want to draw, before we go, attention to this question from J Star 1964. Thank you for your patience, by the way, if you're still watching, because this was sent in earlier on, but we're just waiting for the right moment to get round to it. So Chaiwa, he was included in the provisional squad for Zambia for AFCON. I think there was they named a provisional squad of something like 55 players, and obviously that's going to be quite significantly trimmed down. But you know, given that he is, you know, he's kind of always there or thereabouts, it is expected. I think that he'll be going, but there is a wee bit of maybe a slight grey area in terms of the release. So what has happened over the last the sort of release deadline for players going to AFCON, it's actually been pushed back. So it was actually supposed to be today. That was the latest that clubs could release their go to the tournament, because obviously, you know, teams meet up for camps before it. Some of them might even play a wee friendly, or so it's actually been pushed to the 15th. So then that is a day that Hibs play. So whether they'll be allowed to play on that day and then go, we'll need to seek a wee bit of clarification on that. But the deadline has been pushed back a wee bit. So obviously we know that Rocky Bashiri has already been named in the DR Congo squad. We expect Jordan Obita to go with Uganda as well. So a wee bit of a grey area around that one. Maybe one we can look at a wee bit of clarification for over the next couple of days, because obviously it would be a real boost for Hibs to be able to have all those players available when they go to Ibrox next week. But for now, folks, I think we're going to leave it there. There's a lot to cover today, a lot of interesting points to take from Saturday's game. But the main one is that Hibs got back on track with 3 points and a good performance. Takes them into a big game next week, and we'll be building into that for the rest of the week. If you're watching us on YouTube channel and you haven't hit that like and subscribe button yet, folks, please do get involved. It's free to subscribe to us on YouTube, and it helps us to continue to grow the channel as well. So we really do appreciate your support there. And for those of you who are subscribers to hibsobserver.co.uk, or indeed who may not be subscribers to hibsobserver.co.uk, we do have an exclusive interview with the Hibs captain, Joe Newell, coming up on the website this week. And he goes into a lot of detail. He's saying, basically this is the worst year of his career, and you can obviously, why. He's something like 336 days between not coming off injured against Kilmarnock last year and then making his return to the pitch. So he's been through a lot over the past few months, Jonio. He's missed some real highs for Hibs. So he's spoken to our editor, Patrick, in depth and in detail about all of that, and you'll be able to read that on our website this week. So you can see on the ticker at the bottom, you can subscribe to read that and get access to all our content for just £1, and that gives you 6 months full access. So if you're interested in that interview, folks, do join us on the Hibs Observer. We really appreciate your support, and it is well worth getting involved to read that interview with Joe. So for now, thanks to Craig, as always, for his analysis and insight, and thanks to you folks for joining us. We'll be back again later this week. But until now, have a nice evening, and we'll speak to you again soon. Cheers.